Welcome back to Magic Hour Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Taylor Paige.
And I'm Claire. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
So, our topic this week is all about navigating feeling stuck, stagnant, or blocked. And this is a topic that I, first of all, want to say up top that I completely have a lot of compassion for. And nothing that I say in this episode is finger pointing or victim shaming or even saying that we have 100% control, because we don't. So, this really is a conversation that I felt called to share because I think it's one of the most common topics that comes up in readings with people and just seems really relevant right now. And I know we've been navigating this Saturn-Neptune conjunction that makes everything feel a little clunky, and we're all in like reflective time periods where we're really questioning big picture things, and we might feel disillusioned with things, and there's just a lot of this energy. And so when I got the download that I shared on Sitting with Spirit for 228, I felt like I need to expand this into a full episode because I have a lot to say about it. And I think that this information is really needed, especially right now.
Yeah, I was so excited when you told me you wanted to touch on this because I'm also feeling that way and have on and off forever, probably. I think with career and romantic life, which were two of the main things that everyone seemed to bring up as well. It's so easy to feel this way, and it can make you feel really hopeless. And I think then that can be this like horrible cycle where it just can be really hard to pull you out of that feeling. So I think the more we can be open about it and talk about it and obviously get your insight and guidance around it, it helps us all to navigate because no one is exempt from feeling this way at some point.
For sure. And I think also every single person in every single phase of life is going to have a layer of feeling blocked or stuck or wanting more because it's programmed into us to always look towards what next, what's more, instead of sitting with everything we already have. So I feel like there's also just a pattern of always wanting more and always wanting to be in the next destination that this topic is also asking for, like almost deeper nervous system regulation and healing internally to find peace with our current circumstances. Of course, that's if our basic needs are being met. Like we have food and shelter. And so, by the way, like everything I say on this episode is from the premise that our basic needs are already met. Like when we're in survival mode, we have to get out of survival mode before we can even start working on these like deeper esoteric spiritual concepts. So, sometimes I hear people in the manifestation world or the spiritual world being like, your thoughts create your reality or things like that. And it's like, say that to somebody who's starving in a war zone. So it doesn't apply to these spiritual esoteric concepts. There's like a level of privilege with them to have your basic needs met to a level that they apply. And in the context of this conversation, I'm assuming that. So there's so much to say, and this is such a deep topic. I think that one of the most common things that I see is like a splice between the head and the heart. And the head, usually in this society, is like running the show. And so the head is really like the architect, and the heart is the energy center that says, this is what I need. And the head says, let me craft circumstances to meet that need for you. But the problem is sometimes the head attaches to one particular path or person or outcome or timeline that it says, this is the way to meet this heart need. Let's plan and push and architect and craft a path to get that. And then we can have this myopic view where we tunnel in on like the only way that our head is telling us the story of how we can get this need met. So the first thing that I want to say is for people feeling stuck, disillusioned, stagnant, it's actually a good sign that you're ready to up level. And it doesn't usually get talked about this way, but you are currently living in circumstances that your heart has healed past, and you're ready to create a new life that meets a new heart need. And so, say, for example, our heart is like, I want to feel safe in a way that I've never felt safe. So then your head is like, I know exactly what to do. We'll get this steady 9 to 5. We'll marry this person that never fights with us. We'll do this, this, this. And we craft our entire life to meet that need. And then we start our healing journey and our healing work, and we connect with our inner child and we start to look at our shadows. And all of a sudden, our life isn't feeling authentic to us anymore. And we start feeling stuck and stagnant because our heart no longer needs what the unhealed version of us needs anymore. So the fact that you're already starting to feel like this isn't meeting my needs anymore is already a really powerful sign that you're ready to up level and get more in touch with creating a new architectural plan to support what your heart is actually asking for now.
Wow. That was such an interesting way to put it and think about it. I think my brain is trying to catch up to all of that. And maybe a follow up question for it is like, how to really recognize that as in the difference of like, I'm still working towards something and haven't achieved it, or I've realized that where I'm at needs to shift. Maybe that isn't the right way to think about it, but does that make sense?
I think kind of seeing like, is it what you're working towards that's outgrown, or is it just what your heart needs that's shifting? Is that what you're asking?
Or more just how to hone in on what you just explained, that now I feel like this isn't meeting my need. So, how I can then figure out what would meet my need or what has shifted. So now something new would actually be more in alignment.
Yes. So this is a really good question. And it's basically what I want to spend this episode detangling because there's a lot of layers to it.
Yes.
So the first thing I wanted to point out was just some words of encouragement that feeling stagnant or stuck basically means you're ready for an up level and a change, and that your heart has healed to a level where your current circumstances don't meet the wounded self's needs anymore because you're a more healed version of self. So I told this story in Sitting with Spirit of 228, but I'm going to tell it with a little more detail here because, in case you guys didn't catch that episode, I want all of this information on this topic to be in one place. So I was going through this moment where I was feeling a little stuck and blocked and resentful. And I was in this moment like 2 weeks ago. No, I'm just joking. Like a month ago. And I was like, people aren't showing up the way I feel like they should. And the fruits of my labors aren't getting received the way I feel they should. And I was just feeling really frustrated. And all I could focus on was the problem, not the solution, not what was going right. That's not what felt authentic to me in that moment. I was really in this like bitter, resentful place. And I also felt a lot of shame about that bitterness and resentment because it's kind of like, yeah, I could witness that in myself. And I know how privileged I am. And I have a beautiful life that I'm so lucky for. But that was the truth of my emotional experience in that moment. So, as you do, I went to yoga and I was like, set the intention before my practice. I was like, I need clarity because I'm not enjoying being in this emotional state. I am not enjoying feeling bitter and resentful for like people and things around me not responding the way that I think they should. And so I got this whole download in yoga class that was so powerful that basically I was in the energy of entitlement. I felt entitled for the world to show up a certain way, for life to look a certain way, for people to show up a certain way. And that entitlement was creating bitterness and having me focus on everything that was out of my control instead of what I could change and grow and control within myself to have a different experience. And I think entitlement can be one of those energies that's very sneaky because, as I said in 228 Sitting with Spirit, often when we think of entitlement, we think of like Karens or older women that are like million and billionaires being like, I want the pink Birkin, not the blue. Like when we think of entitlement, we think of things like that. But in reality, we have these sneaky, entitled thoughts within ourselves that zap us from joy. Life should look a certain way. Career should look a certain way. Partnership should look a certain way. And we've been sold these narratives from media, from family, from everything around us, just like these expectations of what we feel entitled to from life. And I just got this message that entitlement zaps us out of abundance and out of creation. And life really doesn't owe us anything. And our true power comes from what we create in our life, not what we feel entitled to. Like we're not in control of our entitlement, what we feel entitled to. And it came up, like entitlement came up a lot when my mom passed. And I was like, I felt entitled to living a full life with her. I felt entitled to maybe her meeting my kids one day. And I was in this place of bitterness and resentment that she passed when I was 30. And then I found out like a week later that this 9-year-old boy lost his mom, and it like completely shifted the narrative. And instead, I could shift to gratitude for 30 long years and getting to know my mom as an adult. And so that's just one example, but that's the sneaky way that entitlement keeps us frozen and stuck and stagnant because we just keep coming back to what we feel we're owed when we're really owed nothing. Then I got this download that entitlement is what's called a dead end frequency. And that's what I really want to get into in this episode. And there are basically like life giving generative frequencies that we can be in our life, and there's dead end frequencies. And entitlement is a dead end frequency because all of a sudden we've given our power and our control and what's in our power away. And we're just focused on what's not enough, what isn't working, and what we feel entitled to. And we stopped our soul growth right there. We stopped the forward momentum right there. And you can even see this passing down through lineages. Like an ancestor makes a lot of money and does this thing, and then the next generation feels entitled or is raised in this lifestyle they feel entitled to, and then the soul growth stops. It's a dead end frequency for the lineage. So that's how it kind of happens on a macro scale. But on the individual level, entitlement is so sneaky. And then we feel so much shame about feeling entitled. Like I was so shameful and embarrassed that I felt entitled once I located what it was. But holding space for ourselves through these icky emotions gives us so much information because I could flip instead of being like, I'm going to keep repeating what isn't being received well or isn't working and then feel frustrated and entitled. Now I have a clear choice of how I want to move forward in a new way based off of what is in my control.
Yes. Wow. This was my night last night. I relate to this so deeply. And I feel like it's this tricky thing of listening to our heart's desires and feeling these desires for certain things. For instance, going to your example, like feeling supported by the people in your life. That's not wrong to want to, or I would think that's not wrong to want that and to yearn for that or hope for that. But then I think when we get indignant about how dare I not have that, I desire this thing and it hasn't shown up. That's so unfair. Someone else gets to have it and I don't. That's something I'm really struggling with, of comparing myself to other people and feeling so bitter and resentful that they get to have this thing that I feel like I don't get to have. And like, it's so unfair or whatever. And I can feel that is doing nothing for me. It's not helping me to feel good in this moment. It's not helping me to receive this thing that I'm yearning for. It's just curling me up with sadness and despair and bitterness and jealousy. And all of that can be information too, but I never really thought of it in the terms of like entitlement, but I think that makes so much sense what you're saying of like how that frequency is a dead end frequency. And yeah, so I think if you have like insight or advice about how to balance the yearnings of our heart or the desires of our heart, these things that we feel deeply we seek, without that turning then into entitlement of I deserve this, why don't I have it?
Absolutely. And I have a few exercises and different ways of thinking about this that I want to share, but you actually touched on something really important, which is where I wanted to go next. And comparison is one of those dead end frequencies, too. There's nothing life giving or creative about comparison. It's fully focused on another soul's experience. And I think we all do this. And I think, especially in the age of social media, it's like almost impossible not to compare to like other people's highlight reels and everything like that. But as a professional intuitive, I can tell you like comparison is cherry picking the ego's perception of where we feel our needs aren't being met and then like cherry picking those things. And it's not a full embodied experience of what that other person is really navigating. And we can never really know that. And Claire and I were just talking about this before we hit record. We're like, everybody is going through something on their own level, and we've gotten really good at hiding it and not talking about it. And so when we're comparing, it's really like a helpful tool to be like, okay, where do I feel my needs not being met? And now instead of overly emphasizing how that person has that need met through my egoic perception, how can I turn it back onto how I can actually meet that need in myself or break that down or get more information from our inner child? Because I think sometimes, like going back to that inner child piece, when we like throw a tantrum or get jealous or things like that, it's really little us who's trying to throw a ruckus so that she's heard and her needs get met. But I actually want to share some of the other dead end frequencies. So if you're in a moment where you feel stuck or blocked or trapped, like entitlement was my dead end frequency, but there's actually quite a few. And they're called dead end frequencies because there's no moving past that. Like when you're in the frequency of them, you've shifted focus and your creative power onto either someone or something else that's completely out of your control. And so it stopped your forward growth and momentum, and you're in this dead end stuck place.
Can you repeat that again? The part where you said it's a dead end frequency because it shifts our focus. I need to hear that one more time.
Okay. So it's called a dead end frequency because in that frequency, you've given your power away to something out of your control. And so our creative power, our growth, our agency, what we can move forward with is not what we're focusing on or implementing or integrating. It's all focused on someone or something else. And so the dead end frequencies, entitlement is the one I started with. Victimhood and self pity is a really big dead end frequency. I always say this, our inner victim and our inner witch cannot co create or exist together. Like our witch is the person, the powerful part of us that's in our full agency, connected to our desires, in our full power and expression, mind, body, soul. And the inner victim is like, everything happens to me. I have no power. It's everyone else's fault. I'm not allowing this or co creating it. It's just like happening to me. And so I think that's a dead end frequency for obvious reasons because you've given power to everyone else and how they're controlling your life instead of looking at, is there a way I'm accepting less than I deserve? Am I co creating with this? And by the way, again, all of this is said with such love. And I have been there. Claire's been there. It's like, this is not to judge. It's genuinely to name a thing so that we can have power over it. So it's not sneakily pulling the puppet strings in the background. But that victim consciousness is a really, really common one. So, something that I got intuitively about this topic is that usually on the other side of the dead end frequency is a really difficult, painful truth that we don't want to acknowledge or feel. And so the dead end frequencies are serving us in a way to anesthetize that and to try to make us feel safe in some way, but then it also leads to an uncomfortable comfort zone and feeling stuck. So usually like our deepest fear, our deepest shadow, our deepest wound, our deepest like chip on our shoulder, our Achilles heel, like is on the other side of this dead end frequency. And this dead end frequency is trying to protect us. And it's like, all right, just stop it right here. Let's stop right here. Yep, I'm the victim and I'm perfect and everything's happening to me. But on the other side of that is like something really tender that's very difficult to look at.
Oh, wow. I think that can be hard to name as well, especially when you're in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we move past those things? I'm sure we'll get into that, but yeah, how do we move past that?
Yeah. So just to name some of the other dead end frequencies that are coming up, self-absorption and narcissism is a dead end frequency. And narcissism, of course, there's like actual narcissistic personality disorder. There's also just like narcissism as a protector and a defender. That's more of like a spectrum, like narcissistic qualities. And that's basically kind of like the opposite dead end frequency of victimhood, where it's like everyone's doing everything to me. Self absorption is just like me, my point of view, my needs. What do I need? Without listening, absorbing, or learning through relationships or other people's point of views. Like sometimes with narcissism and self absorption, there's like never able to admit you're wrong or another person's point of view. It's like leads to that kind of energy. And I actually feel this a lot with people's parents. Like when I feel into like the boomer generation and above, I feel a lot of this energy as like their kind of generational protector. I think it also like self absorption and narcissism can kind of come from not having the most neuroplasticity in your brain and like creating new habits and continually learning. And it's just like my way or the highway. I know everything. And that's a dead end frequency because it stunts your growth right there. And like we learn so much through connection and through each other. Closed mindedness is kind of like a sister language of that, but thinking I know it all and I'm closed minded and it's my way or the highway, that's a dead end frequency. Resentment is a dead end frequency because it's holding on to the problem and again shifting to the other person's path and lesson and holding us in this place where it is that sister frequency to victim consciousness. And it's not to say like everything has to be forgiven, everything has to, but like for our own sake, not wallowing or like stewing in resentment because it does affect our path, our joy, our happiness. And it's more for our sake to get out of these dead end frequencies. Resentment is trying to protect us from not getting hurt like that again. And just like I said, all of these dead end frequencies are trying to protect us in their own way. Controlling everything is a dead end frequency. Like thinking that we have to know everything, control everything, how everyone else shows up, how this is going to be done, what timing it's going to be done. Like that stops you right there. It doesn't give your angels any momentum to work with. Overemphasizing other people's lessons is a dead end frequency because, again, you're putting that sort of a sister to victimhood. And then avoidance. So there's like escapism, avoidance, and disassociation. That's a dead end frequency because you are like kind of floating above the problem instead of really coming back down and facing the block. And so when I got this download about dead end frequencies, I was like, it was around the same time as that yoga class, and like more and more information started coming in. And I went on this nightly walk that I go on in my neighborhood. And there was this path on the sidewalk that was like half in shadow and half in light. It was really cool. Like there's a big tree, and the tree was making this sort of pattern of shadows on the sidewalk under the street light. And I got this message that, like, this is a metaphor for life. There's light patches where things just feel sunny and easy and in flow, and there's shadow patches. And when we avoid the shadow parts of the path, we can't progress. If we only stood on the light parts, and by the way, some of the pattern was like light and shadow at the same time, like it made such an intricate pattern. It's not always as black and white, it's like all light, all shadow. Sometimes it's intermingled. But if we just stay in the light bits and lean into like the dead end frequencies that are keeping us from fully going into the shadowy bits, then we can't walk forward on the path and we just feel stuck. And so I think that there is this natural duality to life. And this is another message that was coming through where the nature of life and reality is duality, meaning perfection can never exist. There will always be imperfect thoughts, unhealed times, wounds, difficult things, etc., because that's the nature of being spirit and human. It's all about duality. And so perfection can't exist. And so we naturally have to allow for these times of more difficult, shadowy things to happen without judging ourselves as like that's representative of who we are or the path or like we're failing. It's just the nature of duality. And if we were always in expansion, we would never get to integrate that and really feel that. It's kind of like I saw Trevor Noah telling this story on a podcast where he was like, I used to love Six Flags and going on the roller coasters. And Then, I became famous and they were like, hey, like, you don't need to wait in the lines anymore. Like, we'll shut down everything. You and your friends can go on as many rides as you want. And at first he was like, yeah. And he went with his friends and they went on every roller coaster multiple times, did anything they want. They got through the whole park in like 2 hours. And on the ride home from that, they were like, that's actually the least amount of fun we've ever had at Six Flags. There's something about the waiting in line, the anticipation, the momentary like excitement, and then talking about it after before getting right on the next ride. And I think that's a story that perfectly exemplifies this. Like the integration, the natural barriers, the pumping of the brakes that force the foundations, the processing, the anticipation, the integration is such a necessary part of joy and creation and fulfillment. And if we had no shadow patches and we could just walk the path of all the light patches right away, life could be over in a couple months. We'll have done everything we wanted to do. So I think it's also like shifting again the entitlement, the expectation, the comparison to others, and like realizing that path of shadow and light is perfectly designed for our maximum experience of duality here on earth. And if we're always in constriction, then we're not having joy and fun and play. So it's all about finding that balance within the construct of duality.
Yes, I love that story so much. And so coincidentally, and I forgot it until you said this moment, I had a dream about Trevor Noah. He was in my dream last night, and I never dream about Trevor Noah.
That's
I
hilarious.
know, and I totally forgot about it until you said that. And I was like, oh, yeah. Anyway, so my angels just really wanted to hammer the point home about your story. And everything about this episode feels so divinely orchestrated for me to hear. So if you're listening to this episode, and like she said at the beginning, like this isn't a judgment, like I am sitting here too, like soaking in this knowledge and allowing it to help me because I am really struggling with a lot of this stuff right now as well. So yeah, I think that story is such a beautiful example. And I think I get really trapped in this thing because I think one of my traps is that I want to live life to the fullest. And that's like a beautiful thing, but it's sneaky because it makes me feel like I'm not constantly, or I feel stressed and anxious if every moment isn't like peak, awesome, joy, fun. And that's totally unrealistic. You cannot live a life where you are in ecstasy constantly or doing the activities and having the experiences that you would deem to be so. And what I noticed that it has done for me is it's made every experience not feel good. That's like a broad stroke. I don't want to say that, but it has tainted my experiences because when I'm doing the thing I deem to be the thing I want to be doing, I'm still so in my head about, is this the most fun I could be having? And I'm not doing this other thing that I love. So I'm missing out on that. It's like totally constricted my brain into this weird loop of dissatisfaction. And I think control is a big part of it there, trying to control my experience and have like max fun. And if I'm not having max fun, feeling let down. And what you said in that story is such a perfect example. It's like we think what we want is like max enjoyment the whole time, like peak 11 enjoyment always. But that would no longer feel like an 11. It would just feel like normal. And so it would dilute the experience anyway. It would give us no space to integrate. It would give us no point of reprieve. It would give us no valley to then be on a peak. And so I think it's so important to acknowledge that we are not here on this earth to be in ecstasy constantly. We are here to grow and expand and go on this journey of our soul. And part of the journey is the parts that are tough and complicated and confusing. And what we do with those parts, I think, is the like magic sauce. It's not about how do I get to joy constantly. It's like, how do I alchemize every experience to expand my soul? So I think that kind of tangented off, but I just think the shadow and light parallel is so important. And if you just stayed in those light patches, you wouldn't even get down the block.
Exactly. And I think if we look at celebrities as like a case study, are they really enjoying their life? Like, let's look at that. A lot of them move to the middle of nowhere where they can be treated like normal again, where not everything is like open to them. Because I think it does something to our psyche when we're like fast tracked in this way, where all of a sudden we can have everything we want at the touch of our fingers. And I don't know if that's really the highest fulfillment that we can have as humans. So I like was just seeing a clip of Lindsay Lohan. She's like, yeah, I moved, I forget where, but like somewhere in Europe or something. And she's like, I'm living my best life. No one knows who I am. I can just live a normal life. And so I think there's something to that. And just to go back on your like comparison thing and also wanting to live life to the fullest, I think that that's really interesting because it's like your ego's perception of what living life to the fullest would be. Because living life to the fullest includes duality, because that's how we can be the most integrated, present, powerful person to enjoy our current circumstances. So I think living life to the fullest is like asking your inner child and your ego, like, where does this need, where did I feel suppressed, or where did I feel like I wasn't having enough fun or getting the full experience that I should be getting? And how is it keeping me from fully enjoying everything that is magical right here, right now? Because that's really living life to the fullest.
Yeah, it's like this silly idea that, well, I think it's like the trick of life. And going back to celebs, like the great Jim Carrey is so outspoken about this, where he's like, I wish every human being could achieve the level of fame and success that they think they want, so that they could realize that it is not the answer to your happiness. Like, maybe it will be a fun experience, but it's not going to get to the root of that thing that we all feel. And so, I think the way that we get to the root of that is exactly what you said, like making the most of the moment that we're in, moment to moment, living the fullest in the moment that we're in, finding the joy and expansion in the moment that we're in, and seeing all the magic that is here, recognizing the magic that is here versus being in the lack of it all and deciding it could be better. I think that's been a trap of mine for a while now, where I just feel like, but it could be better, or this other person has it better, and therefore I'm missing out or doing it wrong.
And I think that the more people like social media has done us a service in some ways because we have more access to people who quote unquote are living our dream, and we can actually sometimes they get real and open up about what they're dealing with. And a reoccurring theme that I've heard from people is the more I healed, the less I actually felt like I had to achieve all of this stuff outside of me. And so I feel like this feeling of blocked and stuckness and stagnancy can sometimes be because we're chasing something from scarcity consciousness, or we never feel like things are enough, or we're not safe enough in our nervous system to sit in spaciousness and to really just be with ourselves. And so we're always looking for like the next high, the next achievement, the next thing that our parents would have validated us for. It's like it goes so deep and is so intertwined with like nervous system and inner child healing too, because when that's running the show, our soul is not running the show. And then inadvertently, the universe pumps the brakes through different patterns until we recognize that and do the healing on that. But I really want to go into the root need that you were talking about, because this kind of leads me into some of the exercises that I want to offer as maybe things to do to reframe or to really get deeper if you find yourself in a stuck, blocked moment and you feel some of these dead end frequencies coming up. So, as I was saying, so much of our MO as humans is our heart as our GPS system, our mind as the architect to meet the needs of our heart. And so I think sometimes if there's an area that we feel really stuck and blocked in, even to use like Jim Carrey as an example, like I know for me and on the acting path, like one of my core needs was like to feel seen. I feel like there was a lot of things in childhood that left me feeling a little bit unseen or unheard. And I felt like, oh, little 7-year-old me was like, if I'm an actor, people will see me and I will be heard and I'll be understood. And then my brain was like, let's do that. We'll be an actor, we'll be on camera, people will see us. But that wasn't really like my authentic heart-led path. And then I grew out of that and healed and was like, my need is being met a different way. I am being seen. So I could kind of like go down a different path. But I think that taking the area that we feel stuck and blocked in and starting, even if it's just like a manifestation, like a partner or a living situation or a job, and getting to the root of what do I feel? If I really sit with that experience, person, like fantasy, if I sit with whatever that is that I'm trying to achieve, what feeling do I think that will give me? Is it a feeling of freedom? Is it a feeling of joy? What need is it meeting in me? How does it make my inner child feel? And what feeling do I think that it's going to give me? And then I think if you want to then break it down into feelings instead of attaching to what it has to look like or the timeline or what other people would say or anyone else's path, sit with that feeling and really tune in and brainstorm and be like, how can I give myself that feeling in another way? And that doesn't mean you have to step off the path or not go for that thing anymore, especially if it feels like a full heart yes. It means that you're starting to give yourself that need in a new way that starts to create momentum and starts to get the ball moving and starts to inspire you. And then you can start to relate to that thing that you're going for differently because it's not from a place of need or lack or scarcity. You're meeting that need for yourself. Then you can actually see if that thing is really for you, if that need is being met and you still feel drawn towards it.
Yes, 1,000% yes. This is something that I feel like I'm finally grasping and understanding, even though it's a practice, it's a daily intentional practice. And I needed this reminder to deepen this. But I think it's such a powerful reframe because it's true. Like we think what we want is the career accolade, let's say, or the romantic relationship. And of course, that relationship we know would bring us so much joy. And we feel like we can't experience that joy without it. But the fact is that joy exists for us. Now, it might be a slightly different frequency than the joy of an intimate cuddle with someone that I guess you can't generate on your own. But we forget, like, one of the big ones for me is I want to spend more time in nature doing like adventurous things in nature. And I feel a little stuck with that because I live in a big city pursuing my dreams and I don't want to give that up. But it feels like this impediment to this other piece of my life that I really want and I don't know how to create it for myself. But if I get really still about it, okay, what does being in nature like that make me feel? It makes me feel calm. It makes me feel expansive. It makes me feel peaceful. It makes me feel connected. Last night I went for a hike. Maybe it wasn't the most epic hike you've ever seen in some like crazy landscape I've never been to, but all of that exists on that mountain too, if I choose to open to it. So I just think it's such an important piece that we can create that level, those feelings for ourselves here with what we have in ways that we're not expecting. And another quick piece of that I just want to add on to, because I think a trap, and my therapist Rachel brought this up to me. I think a trap with those things sometimes is, oh, and then I'll be able to manifest what I want because I'll be in the right I'm just in the wrong frequency. But so if I can shift to the right frequency, then I'll get it. And I think the deeper lesson there too is I deserve to feel those feelings now because it will bring my heart and my soul the joy and love and calm that, is its birthright. I should do it for that reason, not because it's another way to control and bring in the thing I want, but because I deserve to feel that joy right now with or without the relationship. That joy is available to me here and I can tune into it. I just have to make that choice.
1,000,000%. And that's such a good and important distinction. And I think that even falls into one of the dead end frequency categories, which is kind of avoidance of the present and control. It's like you're still thinking about, and this goes back to something I talk about in the Love Life workshop, which is if then thinking being like the root of all suffering. If I do this, then this will be the outcome. If they liked me, then this is how they would show it. It's like all based in projection, not reality. And so I think that is such a good point. If you're only doing something or meeting your needs in this moment because you think it's going to get you something in the future, then there's something about like super internalized productivity and like addiction to self improvement and all of that kind of underlying shadow that might be indicating and trying to get your attention if you don't feel worthy of that need being met right here, right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what you were saying is just so huge. Going back to that about just being able to tap into those feelings that we think the thing we want will get us.
Yes, exactly. And thinking back to like when I was at my most stuck in my life, I was like, out of this really abusive 5-year relationship. I was like a shell. I was so sick. I didn't know what career path to take. I was just in the most rock bottom moment of my life. It's right before I met you, Claire. I think I met you at 26. It was like right before that. And so I was just down and I felt such low self-worth and I felt so lost and I was so mad at myself for letting this person treat me like that for 5 freaking years and feeling like I wasted my time for 5 years. Like, where do I even go from here? And in that moment, I decided, okay, I can just rot in this like self loathing, or I can start to follow the rivers of my curiosity and see where it takes me. And in that moment, I decided to learn 5 new things. I read this book called What is Your Self Worth? And I decided to learn 5 new things. And I deepened my astrology practice. I got into tarot. I started teaching myself French. I was like learning something else. And then look at how that directed my path. So I think curiosity is a really good, like, following the curiosity. And I didn't do that because I was like, one day I'll be a professional in this space. I just genuinely felt called to those things. And it all led me to a new place where I had new inspiration and new trust in myself and new people that I was around because of the path that I took. I think one of them was comedy and it led me to you. So I think also if you're in this moment where you feel really stuck and blocked, like just picking, and 5 is such a good number because 3 might be the comfort zone and 5 is going to be like, what on earth could I really be interested in? And that kind of leads me to when you're feeling stuck and blocked and trapped. And I see this in readings all the time. The answer sometimes isn't looking forward, it's looking backwards. And we sometimes have been sanitized in childhood. All of our creativity and the things that we used to love and our authentic expression sometimes get so stomped on and tamped down by our family of origin that we start going down these pathways in life that were never authentic to us. And then we burn out and feel lost and stuck and trapped. And so sometimes just like picking 5 things, maybe 3 are for adult you and 2 are for inner child you that never got to experience those things. And sometimes it's like going backwards, like, well, I could never really be a singer like my 7-year-old self wanted to be, but it's like, why don't you take voice lessons for her? Why don't you do sing alongs on YouTube? That's immediately going to shift the energy in such a big way than you debating yourself in your head. And that's one of the biggest blocks I see too, is that our angels and guides are literally telling us the answer like every single time. And then we debate the download, we debate the inspiration, we debate the idea until it no longer feels exciting or possible for us anymore.
Yeah, I love that idea of refocusing onto things that you told yourself you couldn't do or shouldn't do, and just refocusing on things that light you up and bring you joy. I mean, when you look at it like that, it makes perfect sense. I think about myself on the mountain yesterday in my spiraling comparison, resentment thoughts, and it's like, where are those thoughts going to take me? What new expansive thing is going to come out of that thought? Nothing. The same thoughts are just going to, it's just a tornado of the same thing. And it gets me nowhere and it changes nothing. It hurts me. And I mean, it's familiar. And so I think it feels like I'm controlling something by trying to get to the bottom of why it's happening. But I think obviously, like pouring into ourselves in the way of learning new things or in the way of trying to really feel into the experience or the feeling that we want, that we think this other thing will do. Like, of course, that's going to lead to more expansion. Of course, that's not a dead end frequency because who knows? One thing I really want to do is get better at surfing, and it's so intimidating.
I love that.
Thank you. We'll see if I actually take action towards it. So I've been like, oh, maybe there's like a surfing meetup group I can find or whatever. So I'm still working on it. TBD on all that, you guys. But what an expansive choice. Who knows who I'll meet doing that? Who knows where I'll end up doing that versus ruminating about a situation I can't change.
Yes, exactly. And that's like that crown chakra block where we're just thinking, 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 but change doesn't happen there. It happens when we take aligned action. And so I love that. And, maybe you can trade surf lessons with like acting or comedy lessons or filming people's audition tapes or helping them with that. Like maybe there's a way that you could get creative about that.
That's so true. Yeah. And who knows what that could lead to and how good it will feel to have chosen to use my energy for that. Because it's so draining being in those thought patterns that you brought out. I don't accomplish much when I'm in that place because it zaps my energy and sucks me into more of the same versus the expansive energy, even the hike. Like by the end of the hike, I was transformed. I felt differently. And so even making that choice, even though it was a rough start, by the end of it, I had shifted. So, those are tools that you have. Pouring into yourself is an endless well that you will receive so much from.
Absolutely. I also just feel intuitively, like going back to that thing about our parents and our grandparents, like how there's kind of this my way or the highway or defensiveness or not open to learning or growing or shifting perspectives in ways. And I'm not saying everyone of that generation, I'm not ageist. I know some people stayed open, but just in general, there was less access to like self reflection and tools and therapy and healing than we have. Like, we're so focused on looking at ourselves and our shit in ways that I don't think older generations quite were. And the feeling that I got, Claire, when you were like, staying in these frequencies is freaking exhausting and not shifting them is exhausting. And I think what we're seeing with this stuck, dense, self absorbed, know it all energy that is difficult with older generations is the result of staying in these frequencies. I think that staying in resentment and bitterness and dead end frequencies freezes you right in place. And then anything that asks you to reflect or think differently or take responsibility or get out of these dead end frequencies is like immediate trigger point and gets shut down. And so I think that us feeling these dead end frequencies and deciding to make a new choice and to say, oh, I hit a roadblock here, I'm going to go this way, is so healing for our ancestors and generations of people that did not have these tools or consciousness and got stuck. Us choosing not to be stuck and to take our power back is such a healing force.
Yes, that's so well put. You're probably going to get into this, so maybe I'm jumping ahead, but when we get into those thought patterns, do you have, and I mean, you kind of spoke to this, but do you have thoughts on like, if I catch myself, I'm like, oh, I'm really comparing right now, like what I can do to shift out of that? Because those things are powerful. And I'm sure we all feel that. It's not so easy as just, oh, I'm feeling super resentful today or entitled. I'll just feel joyful. It's not quite as easy to get out of it. I don't know if you were going to touch on that, but I think that would be helpful if you have anything.
No, I wasn't. And that's such an important question. And I think like my yoga story is a good example of it. Like I was in this moment where I was feeling so frustrated and entitled, and everybody was pissing me off, and everything was pissing me off, and I was just off, and I wasn't enjoying that. And I think first of all, being aware of it as not the truth of who we really are, but one of our protectors coming up to try to like meet a need that isn't being met is really important. And sitting with any shame that comes up around that and not avoiding that shame is really important. And then I think like we spend so much time in our freaking head and on social media and behind screens. And just like you said, Claire, going on a hike totally shifted the energy. For me, it was a yoga class. Like I think we have to do something in those moments to change our scene, our routine, and disrupt that and get back in touch with our body and the world is like an important thing. And then I also think like sitting with our inner child and be like, where do you feel resentful, or where did you start comparing, or whatever like is coming up for you? For me, it was entitlement. Like, where is that? What's the earliest memory I can remember feeling that? And tuning into our inner child, because if we're being honest, a lot of these dead end frequencies sound very like inner children throwing tantrums. Like, it's not really our adult embodied self. So there's clearly a part of our psyche that's like, okay, I'm off balance. I feel like I'm hitting one of these dead end frequencies. So I'm actually going to pause and listen to it, not avoid it, mantra over it, love and light over it, but like actually it's a dead end frequency, meaning something needs to die, something needs to go, something needs to be released. And so doing something to shift the energy doesn't mean avoiding it. It just means putting yourself in a different place for like expanded perspective so it's not overwhelming you. That's really important. And then I think also getting your angels involved. So there's like an element of inner child work, but also pulling cards for yourself. What is in my power right now? What do you want me to see? How can I respond differently? How can I move forward for my highest good right now? And you will get the answer. And maybe the answer is just what's not working. And that's showing you, okay, don't do that. And there's this message I've been getting of like when the universe and other people and things continually show you what's not working, at a certain point, we have to listen to that and stop trying to hit the same thing over and over and over and get it to change.
Yeah, I think that goes back to your thing of like how we'll debate it in our heads. We think that we know, and that's part of our control. And I was really thinking about this today because you sent me some questions from listeners, and I was really reflecting on some of the ones that I had read. And one thing that came up for me is like, so just this idea that we think we know the direction that we need to be going in or the things that will serve us. And how many times in all of our lives, without meeting any of you, I know that you can all think of at least one example and probably 20 of not getting the thing you thought was right for you, not getting the relationship, not getting the promotion, not getting whatever, and that you then realize that there was this gift on the other side of it. My living situation with my roommate and best friend is such a beautiful example of that. We both were coming out of relationships. I was coming out of a relationship that I wanted to be my life partnership. It was devastating when it ended. And now I can see that I'm like, oh, he was so amazing, but I actually don't think he really was my forever partner. And a gift came out of it that I could have never planned. So I think being more flexible with what we think is right, being more open to exploring other avenues of like other pathways, not meaning like give up on your dreams or give up on what you think is right, but being open to different ways of getting there or of it looking different when it shows up. And when we receive that like guidance, being open and flexible with it instead of choosing to be like, it seems like my angels are saying go left, but I'm sure it's right. And I'm going to say no to left again. And then finally realizing, oh, there was something really beautiful I couldn't have even thought of.
So true. And I think tacking on to my little list here of like different suggestions if you're feeling stuck and blocked, like definitely less time on social media. I think that we are outsourcing our intuition to ChatGPT, we're outsourcing community to social media, but like we need real life connections and things happening in the physical world. And I think too many people are living entire imaginary lives in their head and not actually making steps in the physical world. And I think that that is really important, like actions, momentum, growth in the physical world. I also want to go back to this message I got about time is the one currency that humanity has with the spirit world. So, what are you spending your time on is so important. And that's where like doom scrolling and worrying and being in these dead end frequencies, it's like there's valuable information from these dead end frequencies. There's valuable like healing on the other side of them. But then where are you co-creating with them past where they're helping you and giving you the message? And that's where you're no longer giving time as your currency in the most effective way possible. You're staying stuck. And so, where do you want to put time towards what you're calling in? And again, that doesn't have to be a specific manifestation. It could be a need being met, a feeling, something that just lights your inner child up. Where can you put time towards those things? I also think that the energy of should is a really good one to observe. By this age, I should have this. By doing this, this is what the outcome should be, or I should be showing up in XYZ way. And I don't know who originally said this, but I heard someone say on social media, should is could with shame over it. So I think also like when we see these dead end frequencies coming up and we feel stuck and blocked, really taking information from when our inner narrative is dropping those should bombs, the S word, because I think that also will give us a lot of information. And so with our toolbox, I want to add astrology to the conversation because there's actually so much intelligence and wisdom in the way that the zodiac wheel is spread out. And so if you notice that your energy is like being concentrated on one topic or area of your chart, the way to balance it and come back to equilibrium and kind of get out of that intensity is to focus on the opposite houses, areas of life. So, say, for example, you're really focused on like love life and partnership and calling in a partner. That's all of your seventh house themes. Seventh house is like partnerships and marriage. And then you need to focus more on the first house, which is like self, inner child, who you are, what makes you happy, living your life, being the leader and the boss of you. And then if you're too focused on yourself, that's when it's like self reliant, taking everything on your own. Then you need to focus on the seventh house of like asking for help, leaning on partnerships, having someone to hold you accountable, not taking everything on your own. Even if you're feeling like a block in the dating world, that's the fifth house of dating and creativity and hobbies. Then you need to focus on the 11th house, which is like community, friends, how you want to be of service to the world, humanitarianism. Say you're super focused on like your career and what you want to do big picture, and you're always focused on putting everything you have into that. Then you need to come back to the fourth house of like self care, tending to your emotions, home, family, ancestral healing, and cycle breaking. So there's always an element of look at where the block is and then balance it by tending to the opposite house in the chart. And that's a way to shake up the energy and get things moving again, too.
That's so interesting. That's a perspective I never really thought about, but it makes so much sense. And I feel like it can give us some feeling of, I mean, maybe control isn't a good word to use, but it can give us a tangible area of focus. Because I think sometimes with these feelings and these experiences, it can feel like banging your head against a wall, or I keep trying and not getting what I want, or blah, blah, blah. But maybe shifting away from being so focused on that. And that's something else I think is so important. It's like maybe right now we're not having the career success as an example. But what is happening in our life that we get to have this time for? Like, probably when my career is popping off, I'll be super busy and I might not have the same time for my nieces or my friends. Or a really good example of this is a romantic relationship, right? Like a beautiful thing. And when you have it, wonderful. You get to pour yourself into that. But you don't get to pour yourself into your friendships, your community, your work, yourself in the same way. So if you're in a moment where you aren't having those things, take this as the time to pour into these other areas because you're getting that opportunity right now. And don't squander it wishing for the thing that isn't showing up right now. Like, fully embody the things that are here. And then when it shows up, you'll have more to give it, probably.
Absolutely. And you'll just have enjoyed life more. Like it's so cliche, but life is the journey, not the destination. And I feel like our mind can get so hyper focused on I'll be happy when. But I even see this with people who like make a big move and think everything's going to change, but we just bring ourselves wherever we go. And it's just really interesting too, because I meet people and I see people who have so much success, everything on paper that their mind told them will meet their needs, and their needs are still not met. So I think that doing this work and detangling those things and being really honest with ourselves and having the bravery to look at the really vulnerable, tender wound on the other side of the dead end frequency that it's trying to protect us from is making it so we'll actually be the version of self that can fully enjoy and be present with what we are calling in.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it goes back to that thing of if we get all the fame and success as an example, but we still don't feel that satisfaction. It's like doing this work now to be able to be in love and joy with whatever is presented with you, whatever thing is here in your life, like learning that practice of that self love and the way to access joy no matter what's going on, then you get to carry that into your romantic relationship, because we know that having a romantic relationship isn't just this fix of, okay, I'm happy now. It's its own experience. And if you're not adept at finding the joy or finding yourself already, you'll also struggle with that in the romantic relationship or in the dream career.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's like how we've been indoctrinated into the happily ever after narrative, and that just does not exist. We show up moment to moment with ourselves, so we might as well call ourselves on our BS and tend to it sooner rather than later.
Yes.
There's also like an interesting, going back to astrology, noticing where your Taurus Scorpio polarity is. Like people with Taurus and Scorpio, especially if it's very prominent and especially if it's in any harsh geometry, those are the signs and the polarity that's literally all about getting fixed or stuck or trapped in things past their expiration date. Because Taurus is like in the material realm, it wants money and security and safety and resources. And then Scorpio is learning to let things die away so that they can be like shedding the ashes and burst into new flames. And when that axis is like more hindered in the chart, it can be harder to let things go or to feel to confront the shadows around things. And so look at the houses that Taurus and Scorpio rule in your birth chart. See if there's any planets in there that might give you a little hint into where it's harder for you to let go or where that fixed, stuck, trapped energy might sometimes come out when it's out of balance.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Do you know, or you know this, but I feel like the houses are kind of a hard thing to understand. I'm sure I could Google it and find it out, but that's like a different element than just like our planets are in a different house and it's all very specific. Yeah.
Yeah, the book that I recommended on, I forget which listener question episode it is. I think it's The Stars Within You by Juliana McCarthy. That's a really good one. She has like a wheel in that book that says what all the houses rule. And then you can just like, astrology is so layered and you can never know everything there is to know about it. Even as a professional astrologer, like there's just infinite stuff to know. So I would like not try to know everything, but add to the layers of your understanding. Like one little aha moment here and one little moment aha there. But I think with astrology, it's really cool because it's like looking in the mirror. Every time we look in the mirror, we see something new because we're changed and a new part of our chart clicks into place because we're ready to see it in a way that we glossed over because we weren't ready before. So any little aha moment you have with your chart is exactly how it's meant to work. It's not meant to reveal itself all at once. It's so complicated and dense for a reason. It's like how Women Who Run with the Wolves is so dense because you're meant to keep being ready to see new things when you look at it. Kind of goes perfectly with this metaphor of not getting all the juice right away because then we wouldn't fully sit with it and be ready for it and integrate it. But like the way that we have to work for it and let time go by to understand it is the point when it comes to the birth chart in a lot of ways. I do want to say too, there's just like a simple message here of deep down, I think we know more than we give ourselves credit for. Like when I'm in readings with people and I'm like, this is what your angels are saying, and this is how they're telling you to move forward, and this is what I'm getting, like 8 times out of 10, they'll be like, "Ah, I knew that. And it's not what I wanted to hear you say, but I knew it." And so I think more times than we give ourselves credit for, our intuition is spot on. We know what's not good for us. We know what's not right for us. We know what isn't serving us. We know what's been calling to us, but we're a little scared. And I think just giving ourselves permission to like radically listen to that voice that is guiding us is so important. And Claire and I were talking before we got on about how people have lost the art of listening. And I was telling her about a situation I had with someone that was a little clunky and difficult because they were just waiting to talk instead of actually listening to what I was saying. And I think that sometimes we refuse to listen. Like we can be good listeners with each other if we've learned that skill. I think my acting background helps with that. It's all about listening. But with the universe, are we really listening? Are we really listening to what we know deep down, to what our inner child feels, to our emotions, to our body, to our angels and guides, to how the universe is showing us a yes or a no or a maybe? Like, are we actually listening? And I think that that is so important because it's like the energetic equivalent of waiting to say the next thing when the universe is showing us a block and we're like, okay, well, anyway, my thing again. And we just try to push that in the same way. Can we get better at actually receiving and listening? And that's 99% of intuition and intuitive development is actually just learning to listen.
Yeah, that's a great parallel because I think the person in the conversation who isn't really listening is totally wrapped up in themselves, thinking about what they're going to say next. And I think often that comes from places of like insecurity, right? Of wanting to be interesting, of wanting to have something to say, put my opinion there, impress this person, not seem like I don't know, lots of things like that. And I think that can happen to us, like you said, with the universe. It's like, even as you're saying that, I was like, yes, I do know. And I know that this situation that I keep ruminating about has shown me clearly that it's not good for me or for me. And that I think I'm afraid of fully letting it go because what if, and then all my fears, you know? What if there's not something better? But this isn't good either. I think yeah, there's just all these reasons why we don't let go into the flow of life. And I think in a way, that's what keeps us stuck. You know, it's like we kind of look to the circumstances around us and we're like, this is keeping me stuck and that's keeping me stuck. But I think our inability to allow for flow or our inability to like, I used this as an example a while ago with you where it's like I feel like the universe tosses us a ball and then we're supposed to toss the ball and be ready for the next ball. But instead we hold that ball and we get dragged with that ball and the universe is like, so drop the ball because I got another ball coming and I can't toss you the ball without. So it's like, can we be more in that flow and that trust of like, I don't need to control and hang on. I can still move towards the things that my heart is calling for, but also allow myself to be empty. You talk about that a lot. It's like, if we don't allow for empty space or ourselves to be empty, if we stay in that relationship that isn't serving us because we're afraid there's nothing better, then there won't be anything better. We don't allow space for the better thing to come in. And it's a terrifying, it goes against all of our nervous system and instinct. Like, we think we're protecting ourselves, but can we take the bolder, more courageous choice to be like, I don't know what's on the other side of this, but I'm trusting the flow and I'm going to let go and keep these arms open for the next ball or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you were saying too about the universe tossing you a ball and then be like, okay, toss it back. And we're like, no. That's like such a great metaphor. And it reminds me of this card in the Wisdom of the Hidden Realms deck by Colette Baron Reed, the Lady of the Gift. And basically, when I pull that card upside down, the message is I've given you a gift, take the gift, but then don't hold on to it to the point where your hand is never open again for another gift. And think about the universe handing you a piece of chocolate cake. It's like, oh my God. And by the way, I love chocolate cake, like sub a fruit tart if you don't like chocolate. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Oh, I love this. This is exactly the nourishment, the sweetness, the delectability that I've been calling in. And I'm going to hold on to this cake for until the cows come home. And then all of a sudden the cake starts to rot. You're full of cake. It's not good anymore. Our gifts have expiration dates. They're a gift that that version of self attracted. And then we change and alchemize and grow with that gift and are ready for a new one. And if we don't ever trust that that new one is going to come in, we're letting that old gift literally rot in place. Even if, say, like a person or a job comes into your field as one of the gifts, it doesn't mean you just have to get rid of them after a couple years, but even that is going to change and evolve and grow, and it won't be the same old version that you're still holding on to. It's like continually passing that ball back, like Claire was saying. And so it like brings me back to when I first got out of that 4.5, 5 year relationship. I was like terrified of the space that created in my life because that person had infiltrated my life in every area. And I was like, who even am I without this relationship? And I remember so desperately trying to keep my planner full so I would never be alone. And I was like writing on it like comedy class and friends and going here, going there, going home to Ojai and being with my family, like anything but the spaciousness. And I think like it's interesting what you brought up, Claire, because I really related to it. Like, especially younger me was so scared that the space would never be filled in my life again, was like so scared that nothing would ever happen again. But by trying to like frenetically make things happen, I wasn't allowing for my most joyful path. And I think that element of like feeling safe and spaciousness is such a big one. And it goes hand in hand with listening. Without spaciousness, you can't really listen. You're always talking. Like our action and our inertia is talking to the universe. Our spaciousness is listening to the universe. And if we're always planning, talking, doing, achieving, we're talking over the universe 100% of the time. And when we're still and quiet and reflective and listening, then we can hear the guidance. And it needs to be like an actual balance, and you need to feel safe to listen. But I kind of want to go back really quickly to what you said about like you catching yourself in that comparison moment and you being like, I know, like what I was saying, you know more than you give yourself credit for at times. And like the universe has repeated this lesson over and over. And you know that underneath that pattern is like a deeper fear that you hold on to. And that's what I was saying too with the dead end frequencies. There's always a deeper, painful nugget underneath them that they're trying to protect us from. And I think like another exercise to think of, and I'll use myself for an example. The reason I stayed in that long relationship and was like abused in the most awful ways was because I genuinely had the painful belief that I would never find someone who would ever love me again. And it sounds like so preposterous now, but back then I fully believed that. And so I put up with so much more than I ever should have because I truly feared that much not being chosen, not being chosen by a man. Like, wow, crazy. And I think if we can take the nugget of like our most preposterous, fearful, dark, worst case scenario and prove to ourselves that we choose ourselves, we love ourselves, we'll meet that need, it goes hand in hand with what I was saying before about giving yourself the feeling that whatever you're manifesting will give you, and then seeing, do I actually want that thing now that that feeling and need is met in me? And it's like, do I still respond to masculine, the same energy, the same way, and needing to be chosen after I chose myself, after I love myself? And so I think that really painful nugget that we've been avoiding also holds the key to meeting our own needs in a deeper way that then takes away the allure, the shine, and the carrot of whatever external thing we think will prove to us that that fear isn't valid.
Yes, 1,000% yes. And I know so many people will relate to that. And I relate to that. I still feel that way and I'm struggling with that fear and feeling. And it's it's such a different energy to connect with someone when you are needing them to solve that wound, to make you feel worthy and chosen, and you will put up with so much more if you are looking to someone else to do that for you versus doing that for yourself, and it takes time. I'm trying to actively every night before I go to bed reframe those thoughts and deepen into that knowing that I choose myself and I am worthy and all of that stuff. So it's not like an easy, I just choose myself. It takes the work. It takes the work. But then when you're able to really anchor into that and be that for yourself, when you connect with someone, you won't be looking to them to ease that fear. You'll be looking to them to connect in joy and connect because you guys have stuff in common and because you feel that spark. And then if that relationship doesn't work out, it won't completely upend your sense of self, which is what usually happens to me. It's, I guess I'm can't be chosen then because this didn't work out, and it brings up the whole thing over again. And that is such a powerful shift for all of the things that we desire, like getting clean energy around it. There's a card in one of my decks that talks about that, and I love it. Clean energy, and how an exchange that is about your self-worth isn't clean energy. It's trying to fix something deeper that is about your journey with yourself. And then once that journey with yourself is in a better healed way, the things you call in and you receive will have that cleaner energy.
Yeah. And that leads me perfectly like to what I was going to say is that when we tackle that deeper wound underneath that makes this thing an obsession or have power over us or dysregulates our nervous system to such a deep level, when we meet our own need in a deep way that heals that underlying thing, it takes away the charge from that external thing. It takes away the thing that makes it dysregulating and obsessive and attached, and then we can actually see how we really feel about it. I had this like moment where I met up with a friend of mine who's like a series regular on a sitcom, and she has everything that younger me wanted. And I met my own needs and like seeing myself, loving myself, hearing myself, that I thought acting was going to do for me. And I realized, like, wow, I would never pick that path from how I am now. Like, she has to worry about like her weight and how she looks and aging and like being on camera. And her agent told her this about her weight. And she's like kind of flying over here, then going over here. And like the reality of her circumstances, I realized wasn't a reality of who I really am or like my most authentic self. And seeing someone doing what younger me really wanted to do, especially literally a series regular on a sitcom, like that was my dream. And seeing kind of like how I'm in control of my own schedule or this or that, like I'm not the most flexible of people. Like I have period pains. Like I can't just go do things at all times. So like I saw how my path was perfectly carved for me. And that was like a really great moment because the emotional charge had been healed and I could actually see that path for what it really was instead of the unhealed thing that I thought it would get me. And so I think that's like really great too, because then you can actually see like, oh, is this a full body yes? Or was there just a lot of charge under it from unhealed parts of myself? And the other thing I was going to say is that beautiful practice that you were talking about, Claire, of being like, I am choosing myself and it's not an overnight thing, which is so true. It's this healing work is not overnight. And because of that, the universe is going to continually put you in practice situations. It's going to be like, oh, for real, you choose yourself? Okay, here's a shiny situation. It's the same lesson dressed up with new actors or props or clothes. Like, do you choose yourself now? And so I think that it's so powerful when we make these new healed choices, because then the universe will send us like little test and practice arenas to practice what we have decided to embody and to choose ourselves or to love ourselves or to see ourselves or to tune in with ourselves in a way that we couldn't previously. And like I see that so much with family stuff and other stuff. It's like literally uncanny how like some lessons I had with my mom and I made a new choice, like come out with my marriage with Ari. And it's like another opportunity for me to make that healed choice again. It's like, shout out to Rachel, both of our therapists. She said in our session, like the universe teaches through repetition. And it's so true. And like being healed, being powerful, being integrated, being a good listener to the universe is a practice, and you get better at it from choosing it and then applying it every time that it represents itself. And I also want to say too, like, if you get it wrong or you fall back into an old pattern, like, no experience is wasted. You'll still learn things. Maybe that's the amount of time that you needed to really see that that thing was not for you or whatever it is. So I also want to say, like, no experience in this path is wasted. And we learn from everything, and it turns us into our most powerful version of self that's completely multidimensional and has so much to offer than just like one thing.
Yes. And I think that's such an important piece too to remember, because I think something I've gotten caught up on is I thought I healed this, and now this same sort of situation came up. So I feel like I didn't handle it as well. So I guess I haven't. And it's like, I think I was looking at it almost like a punishment or proof that I hadn't made progress. And I think that reframe is so great of no, it's like, you're saying you're choosing yourself. So the universe is bringing you something that's challenging.
Yep.
So that you can put that into practice. And if you struggled to put it into practice this time, that's okay. The universe will send you another opportunity to put it into practice. And then once you've done that, there'll be a new opportunity with your new shifted perspective. It's, again, I don't think we arrive. We continue to grow and expand as much as we allow for. And that is really the point, not just like eternal bliss, nonstop bliss.
Yeah, we'll have that when we return to the spirit world. But like for here, we're really meant to experience duality.
I feel like we should do a part two because there were so many good questions and emails.
Yeah, I think I'll get more into deeper dives on the astrology stuff. And then if you guys have any follow-up questions to this episode, email them to contact@magichourpod.com if you were confused about anything that I said or you want a deeper explanation of something. And then, yeah, I think we should do a part two. And you guys write in and let us know if we should do a part two. Because I think this is a really important topic. It's a common topic. And I think it's something that on some level everybody's feeling right now.
I definitely am.
Yeah. So we really hope that this was helpful. And let's transition to sitting with spirit. Welcome to Sitting with Spirit, my loves, the part of the podcast where we sit with our angels, guides, loved ones in the spirit world and give the messages that want to come through for the collective. Take what resonates, leave the rest. And also, you might get something called a postcard where it isn't exactly the same as what you're going through, but there's enough resonance and synchronicities that you know that a part of the message is for you too. Before we get into the angel messages for the week, I want to talk about a message that came through when I sat in the power today, which, by the way, a fun practice to try is sitting in the power in different conditions to see what's most conducive. And today I had all the lights off and the windows shut and just my Magic Hour podcast sign on. And it made the whole room just glow in this fuchsia light. And I sat in the power in that. It was kind of cool. It was a different vibe. So if you practice sitting in the power, I recommend trying something like that. And if you aren't sure what sitting in the power is, check out my real life Hogwarts journey mediumship development solo episodes. There are 4 of them, and I go into it on there. So as I was sitting in the power, my angels were giving me this key word, which is unshakable. And it kind of is piggybacking off of some experiences that I had yesterday that were just triggering me. Granted, I'm deep in my luteal phase right now. If you know, you know. And I was just getting like a little bit frustrated and, I'll be honest, rageful. And I was observing it and also feeling it at the same time. I was in both, but the difference was I wasn't letting myself act from it, but I was deeply feeling it. And today when I was sitting in the power, I was ruminating on those experiences a bit yesterday, and it was just such an energy shift. And I asked my angels, my guides and spirit, like, what's the lesson for me in these triggers? How can I relate to this differently? How can I show up more powerfully? And the word that kept coming through was unshakable. And it's interesting because I have been on my fitness journey. I like just joined a gym and I'm getting back into working out. And it's been so awesome for my fire sign moon. And sort of how when you're like doing Pilates and you're like doing leg raises or something, and your legs are so powerful, it kind of reminds me of like Melissa Woodhealth. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I used to do her Pilates workouts online, and there would be times where she was in a plank and her toddlers would come and just sit on her, and she was unshakable. She could hold them and herself and hold the plank with a smile on her face. And I almost feel like the message here is the spiritual equivalent of that. Like, we are so used to thinking of strength in terms of our muscles, but there's also spiritual strength and being so rooted in our self love, our personal power, our magic, our trust of our intuition, that our spiritual muscle is unshakable. That no matter what happens, you trust your connection, you listen to your heart, you feel your feelings, you tune into your angels and guides, you trust your discernment, you show up in your power, you heal the witch wound to a level that truly makes you unshakable to what any energy or person outside of you is doing. It's like spiritual bodybuilding. And if you're a longtime listener of Magic Hour, this is one way to get those little 3-pound weights if you're anything like me in your hands. Yes, I do only 3-pound weights, even 5. I'm like, oh man, I don't know about that. And so, with this unshakable message coming through today, it doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean feeling shame if you're not unshakable. It just means coming back to center after a moment that you've been shaken up and not acting from that shakeup, not sabotaging from that shakeup, not rewriting stories of self and harmful narratives from that shakeup, but knowing that you've been shaken up and coming back to center, tuning into your angels and guides and moving from there. And that's what makes you unshakable. Kind of reminds me, I'm not sure if I've shared this on the podcast. I know I have in an Earth Angel Club. This practice that if you're sitting in the power and, so much is coming up and you're ruminating and you're dealing with a bunch of stuff and you're finding it really hard to get out of your mind and into your heart, one is that you could just sit in the power for longer and eventually you'll get there. But two is this thing that I call angel therapy. And I did a version of it today in that example that I gave you about asking my angels, like, what is this trigger here to show me? But angel therapy is basically sitting in the power, sitting in meditation, and allowing whatever you're grappling with to come up, especially if you can't get your mind to a quiet place. And just asking your angels and guides to step close and to help you understand the deeper energetics behind it, to help you see how to move forward, to help you detangle it, to bring up any feeling or healing or messages or guidance most needed now. And maybe you just cry, and that's part of the healing experience that needed to happen. Maybe you get a tough love message about how you could be more in your power. Maybe you get a clear download. You never know what's going to happen. It's not about controlling the experience, but that's a beautiful way to kind of bridge the gap between journaling and meditating, is kind of in that in between space where you can ask for guidance. You can even pull a card and just be in this open container of spaciousness that your angels can help co-create and collaborate with if you're navigating something difficult. So, the first symbol that I saw for the week was the crossroads symbol, but in shadow. And so, this makes me feel like a lot of people are sort of in an in between moment. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of liminal spaces, a lot of, overthinking, second guessing, wondering about the future. And it's interesting because the word patience was also coming up, and patience actually feels really tied to that unshakable theme. Like sometimes it's in the liminal space, the unknown, the shadow, the darkness, and a lack of patience and nervous system regulation to sit in those in between spaces that lead to the shakeups, and that unshakable really connects to patience as like a sister vibration as well. And so I was feeling this need for more rest and more spaciousness. And I got a really important message about spaciousness. Without spaciousness, it makes it a lot harder to up level because we are always in fight or flight. We're engaging in the same patterns that we are always in. We're sort of staying really busy, and there's no space for something new to come in. And chances are, if you're feeling stuck or blocked or at a liminal space crossroads, chances are your vision of your dream life does not include being in fight or flight in a nervous system response. Chances are your dream life and what you're manifesting and what you're calling in requires safety, to feel safe in spaciousness. And honestly, being born into a system of patriarchy and capitalism and all of the things, many of us on a deep level do not feel safe in spaciousness. And even if we have enough, we invent ways to tack on more, to always be pushing ourselves more, to fill the space. It's like so scary to just have an empty calendar, to not fill it, to take one less client at work and have more space, like whatever it is for you that's coming up. Rewiring our nervous system to feel safe in spaciousness is one of the biggest keys to our up level. It really, really is, because it's helping create a life that allows for more ease, intuition, heart leadership. All of those things require spaciousness. And so for some people, this theme of like patience and unshakability through the crossroads is asking for more space. And that's actually a good thing, because it's preparing you for maybe a slower life, a less hectic life, a more peaceful life, a more free life. All of these like root things that you've been calling in require spaciousness. So that just feels really powerful. Really, really powerful. And so, if your body needs extra rest right now, honor it and give your body what it needs to come out of survival mode, because that's going to change everything about your life and how you grow and how you up level. And so I also feel that on a collective level, we're navigating a time period with a lot of humming, anxious thoughts constantly in the background. Like if you watch the news, if you see what's going on in the world, if you feel the collective energy, there's just this low to high grade current of anxious thoughts and existential dread that are kind of permeating the subconscious realm. And at times it bleeds over into conscious awareness too. And I saw whale coming up as an animal guide. And whale is so tied to going deep, 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 deep below the surface. And I got this message that like the triggers that are happening collectively are mirroring deep triggers internally. And whale is here to ask us to go deeper. It's almost like the collective is like these choppy ocean waters on top, and whale is like go underneath it to the root so that you don't get swallowed up by the choppy waters. As an example, I have to be careful about how I speak about this because it's not all my story to tell. But when certain things were happening politically, and I felt like the wool was being pulled over everyone's eyes and nobody was seeing things, and my voice felt very blocked. I had like a big throat chakra block. I realized that underneath that was younger me who felt sort of denied, or like my opinion wasn't listened to, or like I could see things so clearly but nobody would listen to me, was a big theme growing up. And side note, everything panned out how I always said. But anyway, that was something I had to heal and work out in myself, because then these like bigger political themes were happening and I felt like the wool was pulled over everyone's eyes. I could see so clearly and no one would listen. It was like a train wreck in slow motion, and it was triggering that same inner child wound in me. So I know I've shared an adjacent message on sitting with spirit before, but it feels relevant to bring up again, where it's like in this time of a lot of anxiety and intensity in the collective, there's always a deeper inner child wound, ancestral trigger, something underneath it that's asking for our attention, so that instead of being swept up and triggered, we can actually be empowered in our agency, in our authentic energy, and respond instead of react. And that's very important and a very distinct difference And the world isn't going to heal by everyone being triggered and reactive. It's going to come from people doing their inner work, finding the ability to stay regulated in the midst of chaos, uncertainty, and fear, and responding from a heart led place so that we can be earth angels here. So that feels very, very important. And it feels like that might be tested this week. And then I saw this really interesting image of a person dressed in all white standing on the edge of a cliff looking out over the cliff. And white is this symbol of like blank slates, like fresh energy. Sometimes people associate white with like angelic energy, but to me, it's just this kind of lack of color. It's like this blankness. It can even be light and illumination. And so there's something here too about looking at big picture themes, zooming out. If you've been feeling like that liminal space, crossroads energy, unknown, unshakable, patience theme resonates with you, I invite you to meditate on yourself wearing this like white, this robe made of white angelic light, looking over the cliff of your life from a bird's eye view and zooming out of the sort of fray of, it's sort of that vibe of losing the forest for the trees, zooming out and being like, what does the forest look like when I'm not blinded by the trees? What is the bigger picture of how I'm feeling, where my energy is going, what's lighting me up, how I'm treating myself, how others are treating me, just sort of zooming out. And with that, I got this feeling of like fresh starts, leap of faith energy, like seeing things that maybe were not as obvious before, but obvious from this vantage point when you zoom out. So I feel like there's also this feeling of like the brakes being pumped deliberately for those of you that are feeling that need for patience and crossroads energy. Part of it is like the brakes being pumped because there's a bigger picture you're not seeing, or there might be a bigger foundational shift that wants to happen, or a bigger change that wants to happen, or like something that maybe feels out of left field for you in this moment. But if you zoom out, is like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like, this clearly isn't working. And what new direction is calling to me? And how can I zoom out and take a leap of faith towards that? And a leap of faith doesn't have to mean something like crazy. It just means at least taking small, deliberate action steps every day towards it, saying yes to it. So I want to go into the mediumship now. I actually felt the sweetest young boy in the spirit world coming through. He was about 3. I got an H name with him, and I saw that he had a purple octopus toy. And he felt very gentle, and I felt like he wouldn't have had much control over his physical body. I felt like he might have even been partially paralyzed or just very dependent for everything. I felt like he either couldn't talk or spoke very minimally. I felt like he was not mobile, and I felt like he was born with a lot of health problems, and it was sort of even a miracle that he lived to be 3. I saw that there was something about a love of like pirates or pirate ships, or maybe one of his birthdays was pirate themed. There was something connected to pirates with him. And I also felt like he had an older sister. And he, oh God, it's going to make me emotional, but he was just the most gentle, lovable soul. I just want to hug him. He came through and he had a couple of really beautiful messages. The first is, in just 3 years of being with his family, he received more joy and love than he could have ever hoped for in his lifetime. So there's something about him, like his parents being really worried, because I feel like they were wondering, like, was he constantly in pain? Is he constantly suffering? Is this existence torturous for him? And there's just this message of like, my body was heavy, but my soul was so light, and I had so much love, and there was such a beautiful, deep bond of family and connection. And he's so grateful for that. And his message today for the collective is really about the power and the joy of receiving. And he gave me this feeling that he picked this body and these circumstances because in every single lifetime that he's had, it was all about survival and him taking care of himself. And he's never been in a position to receive, to be taken care of, to be loved, and to be held in the way that he got in this lifetime. And his message is let yourself be taken care of. Let yourself receive. You don't have to be so strong. You don't have to do everything on your own. Ask for help when you need it. And it gave such a beautiful perspective to these souls who come in with a deep reliance on their primary caretakers, that it's such a beautiful exercise in receiving on a soul level. And I think we don't have to be in those physical states to ask for help or to receive. And for a lot of us on like a deep ancestral and soul and past life level, it's so much easier for us to be the ones in control, giving, calling the shots, all of those things. But in this moment, if you're needing a little extra love and support, how can you be more vulnerable? How can you open up to receive? And there's so much joy and love and pleasure in receiving too. And everybody deserves that. So this is like such a beautiful and simple message today. But I think being able to receive is a practice that doesn't come easy to everybody. So this week, if you can just practice even asking for help or letting yourself receive like 2 to 3 intentions towards that this week, it might have really powerful shifts in the energy. So I'm sending so much love to you all. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Magic Hour podcast. We are so happy you're here. I absolutely love to connect with you all on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. I love to get your thoughts on each episode, and I get so excited to get your emails to contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss a new episode in your inbox. We have so many amazing guests right around the corner as always. Please make sure to send your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll enter you into an angel reading giveaway with me, which is just my favorite thing, to get to connect with the hummingbird community in that way. You get a bonus entry if you also send a screenshot of your YouTube subscription and also a screenshot of sharing us on your story and tagging us at Magic Hour Podcast on Instagram. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 288 5-star reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We so appreciate you sharing the podcast with other magical people, and it really helps us keep this project alive. To learn more about me, my work, to book a reading with me, take a workshop, please visit angelsandamethyst.com. And remember, you are magic.